Sally. Nice to see you. All right, let's start with a little bit of mindfulness. So what I want to take us into today is a little bit of mindfulness-based movement. So we will be moving, but I want to start with just a little bit of something comfortable. So seated, laying down, maybe for 5 minutes, maybe not even, where we can just take a bit of time to enter mindfulness and kind of really arrive into your practice intentionally. I'm imagining we all do that in a slightly different way. So really feel free to just in whatever way you do. Yeah. Looking at the dog's beautiful face. That's a great way. You can close eyes, you can keep them open. A couple options for you. And then I'll just maybe repeat really briefly one of the things that was named earlier, maybe before some of you arrived, which is that mindfulness can be really hard. And it's a bit paradoxical because it seems like it should be easy. And yet the experience of it for most of us often is that it's tricky. So the way it was described, mindfulness is a muscle, like trying to flex a muscle maybe you haven't found yet. So know that if you're struggling to enter mindfulness, that it is a challenging practice. Now, one of the ways I've discovered personally that like a little portal that helps me enter mindfulness is to track my breath and then find the place where one breath switches into the next breath. If breath happens to just be like a stressful thing or a not reliable anchor for you, I'll just invite you to let that go and find a different anchor for yourself that might be a bit better. But if the breath is neutral or pleasant for you as a focal point, just track it, inhaling and exhaling. And see, can you find the moment where the breath, it'll sort of stop moving. So the inhale stops moving in, and then there's a little tiny pause, and then kind of becomes the exhale. In yoga, we call this the still point. It's just this brief moment of stillness within the breath. Yeah. Finding the gap. I'll suggest maybe playing with this in your own way. Think of it as a little sandbox exploration, just to keep it kind of light, playful, for about the next 5 breaths. And then we'll go about 5 more breaths. And for this next 5 breaths, maybe seeing if you can, once you've found even a micro moment of that stillness, that still point, see if you can then let the breath continue, but kind of hold on to the stillness for maybe a breath cycle or 2. And maybe 5 more breaths, and this will be our 5 breaths of kind of returning back. So whatever is useful for you for completing this section of the practice. Maybe you like to complete your practice with some nice kind words to yourself, or whatever would be good. Hand on anywhere on the body that maybe is calling for attention. Beautiful. And you can return to the screen. Yeah. Some people really like to sort of cover the face first so the eyes are opening to something a little bit dark or some warmth. Whatever works for you. Yeah. We're going to go into some mindful movement next, but before we do that, I want to share a little poem. If you follow me on social media, you've likely already seen this. And shout out to Della for finding this. Della is one of our almost graduated students of the 500 hours. So thank you for finding it's such a perfect description. So I'm going to share my screen here. Forgive my technology foibles. It's always work in progress for me. Okay. I just love this. I don't know if you would call this a poem or just a journal entry, but I'm going to read it, and I love it so much. And I'll just really invite you to see how you connect to this idea. I have a theory that the moment one gives close attention to anything, even a blade of grass, it becomes a mysterious, awesome, indescribably magnificent world in itself. I have tried this experiment 1,000 times, and I have never been disappointed. The more I look at a thing, the more I see in it. And the more I see in it, the more I want to see. It is like peeling an onion. There is always another layer, and another, and another. And each layer is more beautiful than the last. This is the way I look at the world. I don't see it as a collection of objects, but as a vast and mysterious organism. I see the beauty in the smallest things, and I find wonder in the most ordinary events. I'm always looking for the hidden meaning, the secret message. I'm always trying to understand the mystery of life. I know that I will never understand everything, but that doesn't stop me from trying. I'm content to live in the mystery, to be surrounded by the unknown. I am content to be a seeker, a pilgrim, a traveler on the road to nowhere. That's so gorgeous. How does that land? How does that message land for everyone? Yeah. Powerful, yeah? Whew. Yeah. So really, I wanted to share that with you because I kind of feel that that message that he's articulating there, in a way, is the fruit of a mindfulness practice. That it's kind of like, here's the superpower of mindfulness as we could call it a work in progress, but mindfulness as a practice has that way of taking something maybe small and expanding it so that you can see more into it. And in the Hakomi languaging, we'll often say, when in a state of mindfulness, quiet things become louder, subtler things become more obvious. So we can, turn that toward body sensations, or sometimes our thoughts, or sometimes sounds in the room. And what I want to focus on for this little class is that attention is something that we can direct. So maybe before we get into moving a little bit and some experiential, I'll invite this as a contemplation for you. If there were inputs, regular inputs of information around you in your room or in your body, which ones would you want to become louder for you or more obvious for you? What would be most useful? So in polyvagal language, we would talk maybe about cues of safety or kind of benign cues or data bits. Those are often useful to pay attention to. Or when it comes to internally in the body, what are some inputs that might be useful to you? These could be sensations that are warm and pleasing, or sensations in the body that aid or assist in our ability to embody peacefulness. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's maybe sensation or experience of peacefulness in the mind field or in the body. Okay. If you'd like, you can move to your mat. I'm going to lead us through some mindfulness-based movement. Next, what I find to be really useful with these sessions is that we'll do a little bit of experiential together. And then when it comes to the science part, I'll bring that in after so that then you kind of have some experience to set some context for the science part. So we'll go for experience first. Okay, while you're setting up to be on your mat, you can grab items as well. I just sort of always have these. I don't know if we're going to get to using any props at all today, but if you have yoga props handy, you can always grab those for the movement part, some blankets, some yoga blocks. I have my little myofascial balls here. If you don't have those, the rolled up socks work just as well. I don't know if we'll get to that, but if you have socks on, you can always just take them off and roll them up, and those work just as well. Okay. One more thing I'll name also just on the front of inclusivity and accessibility is that any of the mindful moving practices that we do, they can be done seated, standing, or laying down. So really take a moment to track your body and see what will be good today in the way of supporting or usefulness to your body. Is doing them seated better for you? Is doing them standing? Check in with that. What is right and true for you just in this moment to support your mindful practice? All right, and because we're on Zoom and a lot of people have their cameras off, I'm just gonna name that I trust you in being able to take care of your body and to really track yourself and do the movements that feel right and good, and to leave out the movements that don't feel right and good, or to modify the movements you might want to try, but they feel a little too much, and that you can, I'm just going to put the trust in you to modulate your practice, to tailor it to your needs. Okay. What I want to start with is to begin with some simple movements. And we're going to do some kind of simple movement, and we're going to do it over and over. So it'll get a little bit repetitive. And the first movement I want to do is so we call this one an infinity loop. So it's a movement with one arm. We'll do one arm at a time of drawing an infinity pattern, like a sideways figure eight. The movement doesn't have to be a specific size. It doesn't have to be perfect. But the idea of letting the hand move in this kind of like looping pattern. Once you've got it with one arm, you can go ahead and try it on the other arm. Just if this helps you, you could imagine that you're finger painting. Finger painting on an imaginary canvas of this infinity pattern. And then switch to the other arm again. So if if it bothers your shoulder in any way, you can make the size smaller. So you could do a mini loop in front of you. And switch arms at any time. Yeah, and I love what I'm seeing here, just explorations in size. You can do nice big loops and feel how that is on your shoulder. And sometimes it's nice to even get the whole body to kind of follow the arm. Lots of different variations, lots of ways you can play with this. Okay, once you've got the movement and it's the way you want it, let's go both arms. Okay, and every maybe 3 or 4, we're gonna switch directions. So after about every 10th or so, you can pause and shake out the arms and let them rest. Once you've got it, now we're going to bring in mindfulness. So in order to do that, what's going to probably be the most helpful is to really slow down your movement. Just like we did with the breath, can you find the still points in the movement? Maybe it's that moment where the down stops and the up begins. If it helps, go with one arm at a time again. Or make the movement smaller if needed. And then if you want to deepen a little bit more into the mindfulness part, another trick is to bring in the breath and synchronize breath and movement together. So that might look like every time you're on an upswing, you inhale. Every time you're on a downswing, you exhale. If that doesn't feel right, feel free to flip it. You can always exhale the ups and inhale the downs, whatever works for you. How about we do 5 more of these? When that feels complete, you can split the arms, maybe shake them out. You could always rub the arms as well, whatever maybe sends a message into the arms. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You did some good work. Wonderful. And before we go on to the next movement, take a pause and just track the body and notice any changes. Notice how it is to really slow down and track movements so specifically in that way. another movement we'll go into next is mindful walking. And this one's really simple. Basically, we just walk in the way that we always walk, but we slow it down and get really curious about the sensations on the bottom of the feet. Yeah, feeling so grounded now. Wonderful. So if you're standing on your mat, for this one, you can step a little bit further back, and we'll maybe begin with starting behind our mat. And when it comes to mindful walking, I'll just name this before we go into it, which is that sometimes you'll become aware of a little bit of unsteadiness. So really take care of you. If you find that this part of the walking of standing on one foot becomes a little bit shaky or wobbly, you could leave that part out. You could always just focus a little bit more on the rolling part of the gait cycle onto your foot and just play there a bit more. But basically how mindful walking looks is that we slow everything down. So lifting a foot up and then hovering your foot just in front of you for a moment, and then letting that heel drop and your body roll onto your toes, and then picking up the other foot. Well, we do this as a real foundational movement in myofascial yoga because it links into a bunch of other functional movements. So we'll just play with this mindful, slow motion walking. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to really sandbox it and play on your own. If for whatever reason you want to attempt this one seated or laying down, a couple options. You can do this one seated just by feeling the foot roll on the floor, just to kind of like mimic what we do with walking. You could even lay down and just visualize yourself slow motion walking. So really notice how this is. And my invitation to you, again, on this front of directing attention, is what's your favorite part of the gait cycle for you? What feels the best or just feels most interesting? And if you've found that, is there a way to really zero in? Maybe it's the moment your big toe touches. Maybe it's the moment you're hovering on one foot. And so every time you land on that one section, can you pause and go really, really, really slow? We'll do 2 more minutes. One option is to go backwards too. It's a little bit ups the challenge a little bit, but no, that's on the menu if you want to play with walking backwards. Just taking maybe 15, 20 more seconds to complete in your way. And then you can go into a little bit of bouncing. So the myofascial rebounding is an exercise that I find can be really helpful to induce mindfulness. There's something so soothing about the rhythmic movement of it. So you could imagine you're on a little trampoline or you're on some soft mossy ground, and you can kind of see if you can imagine feeling a springy or spongy sensation under your feet and get a little bounce. See if you can imagine that all of your joints are springs, your ankles and knees and hips and spine. Or maybe the arms can come into it too. If that works for you, just give the arms a little jiggle. If we had more time, this is the part in the class that maybe we might get a little more active and put on your favorite song and do a little bit of just intuitive unwinding, that whole dance as if nobody's watching you kind of thing. But just for time purposes, we'll go into some seated mindful movements. However, if you that sounded really good to you and you want to do it, feel free to turn your camera off and do it and rejoin us after. Actually, you can keep your camera on. I love watching the myofascial unwindings. So we'll come into some seated mindful movement. I'm thinking if you do have a ball, we can use this one just as a way to balance, just as like a mindful aid. You can choose any object. The best would be something not breakable because you might drop it. So this movement is A, really great for your shoulders, but B, it's really helpful for kind of honing in the part of the brain that I'm going to use the term boot up to use for mindfulness. So it's a little bit of like a turning on a dimmer switch, where the more you balance this object, the more your mind has to pay attention to where is the ball. So you can balance it on your hand if it's a ball or, a little book or really anything. Ideally, it has a little bit of weight to it, but not heavy, just so that you can feel it. You can start with infinity loops, but really any shape is good. The one I'm going to suggest is to do a infinity pattern. And then as you come out to the side, away from your body, spin it around behind you, and then do a circle over your head. And then come down from your circle and back to in front of your body. So go like this. So I go that like sideways figure 8, and then out away from the body, and then back around behind your head, circle maybe a couple times, and then back down. So this back down movement, if you kind of come through the center of the body, sometimes a little bit easier, but feel into doing that any way you'd like. Okay, I'm going to leave you for about a minute to explore on your own. Choosing your pace. You can really slow it down, or you could try speeding it up. If your arm gets tired, just give it a break. Back into it. When one arm feels complete, go ahead and switch just on your own time. I'll make sure to give you a couple minutes more so that you can feel balanced on both sides. Okay. 30 more seconds or so. For this last little bit, can you get a sense of how is this in your mind, in your mind field, in your mental body? How is it in your emotional body? How is it in your physical body? Right, if it feels like both arms have gotten roughly the same amount of time to play with that each, you can place the ball down. And again, I'm wishing for unlimited time because there's so many more that I want to play with, but just for time purposes, we'll go now into a breath practice that can be really, really integrative. The one that I want to play with is the alternate nostril breathing, and we're going to do it with a hand movement. So normally in alternate nostril breathing, we just maybe move one or two fingers while keeping the hand on the forehead, but we're going to do this a little differently, and I'm going to explain why after. How we're going to do it is for each time I switch nostrils, I'm going to physically bring one hand up and physically block the nose. Now, I'll just say before we go, if you have a cold and physically blocking a nostril just does not work for you, that's okay. You can bring your finger up and just touch it lightly to the skin on the outside of your nostril, but you can leave the nose open. You don't have to physically block it. So really the point of this practice is in the taking the hand up each time. So that's sort of the focus of attention that we're going to be training. So before we move the hands, I'm going to talk you through this here for a bit, and then I'll let you sandbox it. But before we begin, take a little bit of time to track your breath and maybe track your body too. If you get a sense that your body needs shifting or adjusting, take care of that too. Feel free to change up your posture if needed. And then getting curious about the breath itself. Maybe for the next 3 or 4 breaths, let's start with tracking the inhale to exhale ratio. You might need to count in order to really get curious about that. But how long does it take you to inhale relative to how long it takes you to exhale? Might take you 3 seconds to inhale and 2 seconds to exhale, or maybe the other way around. Maybe it's 4 or 5. There's no right or wrong answer. We're just gathering data here. And check and see if that's something that's manipulatable. Can you change it at all and without strain? So this is a really big question. It requires tracking your nervous system and your body really well. So when you inhale, can you draw that out for another second without any distress signals from your body? And when you exhale, can you draw out the exhale for another second? Can you make the exhale longer? Without any discomfort. Like it's like, oh yeah, it actually feels good to exhale longer. The invitation here is to find a breath ratio just for this moment that actually feels good and natural and true. Just for this moment. And if you're not used to working with me, I'll just say this, that I often do things step by step. And I want to invite you that if I take you to the next step and you're not ready, always feel free to stay at the step we just were. And you can stay in step one for all 5 steps. And you don't have to progress if you don't want to. But the next step would be to go from that ratio, so from counting the breath to now tracking the air in the nostrils. That's step 2. And getting a sense, and any little distinctions, any subtle differences. Is the air maybe warmer when you exhale and cooler when you inhale? Is there one side that's more open and one side that feels a little less open? And step 3 is going into the alternate nostril now. And what we'll do is we'll begin with the more open side if you happen to find one. Otherwise, just choose a side. But whatever you track, that open side, you're going to bring the other hand up. So the other hand is going to slowly move. Maybe pointer finger comes to the outside of the nostril. And you're going to breathe in with that more open nostril. And then we're going to switch, and this is the trick. So we're going to slowly move one hand up and the other hand down to exhale through the more closed side. And then you're going to keep your finger there for a little moment longer. We're going to inhale through that closed side. And then we're going to do this switch again. And you're going to exhale through that open side. And then pause and inhale through the open side. So basically, every time you go to exhale is when you're doing the switch with the hand. So we exhale and then we inhale through that same side. And then as you go to exhale, you're going to switch the hands around. Exhale, opposite nostril. Inhale, same nostril. Slowly, so you're going to pause as you switch your fingers. And slowly exhale. Opposite. And then inhale that same side. I'm going to leave you now. So now I'm going to let you just sandbox this and feel free to do it in your own way completely. Just play. I'll give you a couple minutes. So the final step would be that we actually keep going with the alternate nostril, but now we let the hands rest and we go with awareness only or attention only. Feel free to go back and forth between this, like step 3 and 4. But now you're just feeling or attending to the air moving through one side and then the other side. Perhaps you can even visualize or just imagine the hands are still moving up and down just to kind of help you keep track. Find on the visualization practice of it, I like to imagine like a little triangle. Like I'll imagine this stream of gold moving up one side and down the other. And just find your way. I'll give you 2 more minutes. And maybe let's take another 30 seconds to release all effort. And just be maybe steeping in the effects of the practice. Just notice, how did that little exercise impact you? Anything changed? Yeah, effective, yeah. We'll be switching gears here shortly and just go into a little bit of the science bits and some PowerPoints. So feel free to, just take care of any body needs as we switch gears. I'm gonna come over to the computer and stop the recording. So while I'm doing that, feel free to just, check in and see like, oh, I could use a couple jumping jacks or a pediculation, a big yawn and stretch, or maybe you could use a little lay down and a nap. So I'll give you a moment to do what you need to do to take care. I could feel much of breath movement before, but this exercise completely flipped your sensation. Yeah, isn't that amazing? Yeah, and like just because you speak neuro, like you can really feel that sensory system. Hey, like, oh, I've got little receptors in there. That was my sense. It's pretty amazing, actually. Okay, I'll stop the recording.